Our friend Sean Parnell is back with us now. He is a former Army Ranger and best-selling author and was a candidate for Pennsylvania's 17th District for Congress in this most recent election. He's also a commentator. You'll see him on TV and obviously listen to him here on radio. Sean, great to have you.
Good to be back, Buck. Thank you for having me at what is a very interesting time in our country, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're going to a Biden inauguration here just days away. You're seeing all these photos of that the media are sharing all over the place of National Guardsmen, not just being in D.C., but sleeping on the floor of the Capitol. I mean, as though they're preparing for a foreign invasion. I mean, that's the visual that you're supposed to take from this. How are you seeing the political scene right now? What are your broad thoughts about where we as conservatives are at this moment?
Well, I first of all, I think it's America is on the brink. As you probably already know, Democrats they don't even have all three branches of government yet, but they've already proposed a resolution in the House for a constitutional amendment to abolish the Electoral College. Right. So I think what this country conservatives specifically can expect over the next 2 years are some of the most radical pieces of legislation that would fundamentally transform America as we know it. And, you know, you've got this impeachment going on in the House and strategically, Buck, look, I don't think that the president incited a riot. I don't think that what he did rises to an impeachable offense. And if you read the transcript, indeed, you'll see that for yourself. It said peacefully, go peacefully, make your voices heard. That doesn't mean that the riot at the Capitol was acceptable. It wasn't. But at least have the moral courage to say that Antifa and Black Lives Matter rioting all year in 2020, that wasn't acceptable either. Violence for political to establish some sort of political end is never acceptable. But what the president did, I don't believe rise to an impeachable offense, but the Democrats' expected response was to impeach the president for a second time, simultaneously preaching unity. And here's the problem with that, Buck. I think that this impeachment move from a tactical and strategic standpoint on the Democrat side, I'm speaking just politically, I think that they know in their heart of hearts that what the president did not rise to incitement of violence or incitement of some sort of riot. But I think that what they're trying to do is separate traditional GOP from the Trump base, if that makes sense, going into 2022. Because if you're a candidate, whether you're running for the House or the Senate, right now, conservatives have got to walk a very fine line to bring both of those groups out, right? Traditional members of the GOP and the Trump base, especially in states like Pennsylvania. So this impeachment, what's going on right now, is really, I think, from a strategic standpoint, to divide the party and separate traditional GOP from the Trump base. And right now, it's working. And the GOP should recognize that and not allow them to do it. It doesn't mean, by the way, that we should accept what happened as the Capitol as the norm. We shouldn't. It's not acceptable. As I mentioned, violence to establish some sort of political end is never acceptable. But conservatives, it's disheartening to me sometimes, Buck, to see conservatives not circle their wagons and fight. The Democrats always fight. They unify and they fight and they do it quite effectively. Republicans don't. And quite honestly, it's a leadership issue that I hope moving forward is resolved, because we don't win elections unless we as a party is united. Or we as a party are united, and that's where I think the leadership needs to focus now.
What do you make of the big tech censorship effort that's still ongoing now, especially given that we found out that a lot of the Capitol Hill riot, and this is according to left-wing analysis, was actually planned on Facebook, not on Parler. But Parler gets shut down. That seems like, yes, they don't like it because it's a place where conservatives can speak without the left's, not even thumb, but elbow on the scale for the other side. But also, it seems like they really wanted to prevent a mass migration from Twitter users to Parler users to create a new conservative digital ecosystem.
No, you're exactly right. Look, big tech censorship is a problem, but perhaps more concerning than that is the collusion between big tech, i.e., Facebook, Twitter, Amazon. The line of thinking is, well, a lot of people will tell you, well, they're a private company. If you can't follow their terms of service, well, you don't belong on the platform and you deserve to get booted. But the problem is their terms of service constantly change, right? You never really know what they are. And they always end up censoring one group. And so the line of thinking is, well, start your own social media platform. And so with Parler, they did that. And then it was Apple saying, well, we're going to remove you from the App Store. We'll start your own website. You can start your own website. And then Amazon removed them from the server, right? So what's the next step, meaningful step after that? Start your own internet company. I don't know. The point is, I do recognize the sensitivity of a private company being able to call the shots. And I don't like the government forcing them to do business a certain way. But in this instance, I think that there is a monopoly. There was a level of collusion going on to crush opposition. And in this case, what it was is Parler. And I think separately, but also related, shutting down the president of the United States. Now, his official Twitter account is still active. And I think critics would say, well, they left his official Twitter account active, but they removed tweets from that as well, right? Is this not a national security issue? If for some reason there was a national security issue that required the president's attention, and the president needed to reach as many people in the country as he could at a specific time, if a tech company like Twitter or Facebook can simply flip a switch and prevent him from doing that, does that not have national security implications? Especially when, while Twitter and Facebook, they are certainly based here in America, they're a global company, And so how much investment in Twitter and in Facebook and in Amazon, or how much of the marketplace is in communist China? Right? That's a big deal. And if the communist Chinese can leverage any sort of financial power over some of these big tech companies, which, by the way, communist China can do that, and these tech companies can then flip a switch and prevent the president of the United States from leading this country in a crisis, is that not a national security issue? And does that not demand some form of legislation to prevent that from happening? And what you're seeing, countries like Germany have come out and condemned what big tech has done to the president. France has come out and condemned what big tech is in terms of censoring the president. And Poland is really putting forth meaningful legislation to ensure that something like that can't happen in their country. So I don't think it's as simple of saying repeal Section 230, because I think that would destroy independent media, period, right? But there certainly needs to be reforms made to make sure that companies like this can't ban key leaders.
Speaking of Sean Parnell, former Army Ranger, best-selling author, and he just ran in this election for Pennsylvania 17th for Congress in a nail-biter. And to that end, Sean, we've had you on to talk about your concerns about election integrity, specifically in the state of Pennsylvania. Is it effectively now very hard to almost impossible, let's say, to speak about publicly those things on digital platforms without fear of, to speak about real, look, they changed rules in Pennsylvania. We've talked about this many times. They moved around how how early and how late people could vote, and when the votes would be counted, and what you had to do with the mail-in ballot procedures, all kinds of shifts that were made. Do you ever get dinged, or do you ever have a concern that you might be shut down and deplatformed just for talking about that stuff?
Yes, and I won't go into specifics, but it's already happening. Like you, Buck, and many other conservatives on Twitter, I've lost close to 40,000 followers in a week, and more followers on Facebook and Instagram and things like that. And I think this brings me to the second point of this impeachment. The Democratic strategy behind the impeachment is to sort of put forth like the idea that if you talk about election integrity or issues that pertain to 2020, then therefore you're inciting violence, right? That's a real problem. And I think the Democrats right now, and again, the second tier of their strategy with this impeachment is to make any discussion of election integrity what is, in a public forum on social media, a thought crime, when there are really there really are valid questions to be had here, right? And so your question of what's the way forward in Pennsylvania? Well, yes, it is difficult to talk about in public. Were there issues as they pertain to this election? Yes. Are those issues resolved right now? Less than a week prior to inauguration? No, they haven't been involved. They haven't been resolved. In fact, there's still a voter deficit in Pennsylvania that's yet to be resolved. And what that essentially means, more votes than voters. I've been criticized for that online, saying that it's been debunked. It's not been debunked. The only thing that the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania has said is that the information that I'm presenting is based on incomplete data. And I turn around and I say to the Secretary of State, well, then if the data that is incomplete, how then do you certify the race in the state of Pennsylvania on November 24th when there's still technically in the state of Pennsylvania more votes than voters? Now, she'll probably say, well, as time goes on, that gap will close. Well, in Montgomery County, for example, Buck, there's still a voter deficit, right? There's still a voter deficit of over 6,000 votes. In other words, more votes than voters. And they've been done, right, for about 4 weeks now. It doesn't mean they're not working to resolve that. It doesn't mean that gap won't close, but they've been officially done counting for about a month. So moving forward, right, discussing this stuff moving forward for me is not about overturning 2020, right? It's not about that. But if we don't discuss this stuff now, well, then how can we guarantee, municipal elections in 2021 where mail-in ballots are being sent out for in a few months just for a municipal election. And then in 2022, there'll be a gubernatorial election and a Senate race here in the state of Pennsylvania. We've got to have these wrinkles ironed out prior to that time, or the situation will get worse. There's state law in Pennsylvania, PA statute, I think 3154 says that the books at the precinct, county, and state level must be reconciled prior to certification. And right now they're not. And so that's a problem. We've got to be able to talk about it in discussions just like this to make sure that it doesn't happen moving forward. I posted on Facebook today, Buck, about, look, we're going to see some very radical pieces of legislation moving forward. They've already got a resolution to propose a constitutional amendment to abolish the Electoral College. I think conservatives can reasonably expect, Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico statehood. I think there's an argument to be made. The left is going to try to pack the Supreme Court, all things that you've addressed on your show before. Look, these things are coming. And when the Democrats wield power and control all three branches of government, they are never afraid to wield it. But that does not mean that we should stop fighting. In fact, what I've called for, my supporters and volunteers all across the state of Pennsylvania, they need to lean into the fight, Buck, right now. They need to be door knocking, organizing, fundraising, helping municipal candidates and local candidates win at the local level. We win locally, we'll win congressionally, we'll win statewide, right? All of that is important. We don't have the luxury of off seasons now. There's going to be a redistricting coming in the state of Pennsylvania. People and constituents across the state of Pennsylvania should be calling their state legislators and working with them and telling them what their feelings are about redistricting, right? Because it's a Republican-controlled legislature. We control the power there. We need to wield it like the Democrats would wield it, right? So there are lots of very productive things that we can be doing right now. And yes, our backs are against the wall, but it doesn't mean we're out of the fight.
I got to ask you, Sean, before we let you go, you are a decorated Army Ranger, served in combat in Afghanistan. CNN's most sanctimonious anchor, Jake Tapper, referring to Brian Mast, who's a member of Congress who served in the military and lost his legs fighting for this country abroad. Jake Tapper's comment was, quote, Congressman Brian Mast, who lost his legs, by the way, fighting for democracy abroad, although I don't know about his commitment to it here in the United States. What do you say to that?
Yeah. Well, Brian Mast is a friend of mine, and I am so disappointed in Jake, right? Jake is someone to just in the event that your listeners don't know, Jake is someone that writes books about military veterans, that talks about military veterans a lot publicly, and acts as if he's a big supporter of military, makes money, right, on the backs of military members' service. So, but then to turn around and say something like that about a Republican member of Congress who you can disagree with the method, but there's still a constitutional process and structure to raise those questions on the House floor. Brian Mast fought for his country. He lost his legs overseas defending democracy. And believe me when I tell you, the man loves freedom of speech, loves the Constitution, may not always agree with what others have to say about him, but he'll go to his grave trying to protect it. And for Jake Tapper to single him out as a double amputee, as somebody who has sacrificed so much for his country, it's just disgusting. It's just disgusting.
Yeah. Sean Parnell, everybody, check out Outlaw Platoon if you haven't already. You should get it on wherever you get books. Sean, good to see you, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Buck. Take care.
Because Congressman Brian Mast, a Republican from Florida, who lost his legs, by the way, fighting for democracy abroad, although I don't know about his commitment to it here in the United States. He said, did anybody say that?
Yes.
Yeah, we heard him.
The answer is yes.
There you go. That's Jake Tapper, all about the vets and all about the troops, Jake Tapper. Sure. If you criticize John McCain, his favorite thing to do is always John McCain's a hero, and remember, he only was doing that because he hates Trump so much and was using the McCain wing of the GOP as a way of attacking Trump. And Trump said things about McCain that were not nice. We all know that. But it was always a shield. You can't actually criticize John McCain, the Democrats would say, when it was useful for bashing Trump because of his military service. But now here you got a guy that lost his legs in honorable and brave service for his country overseas. And Jake Tapper says, well, he fought for his country overseas, but it's not clear that he cares about democracy here at home. Oh, okay. Just remember that the next time Jake starts tweeting out, I love the troops. I love the troops so much. I'm all about the troops. I've never seen anybody in media who has never actually spent any part of his life anywhere near serving the country in the military, in the State Department, anywhere. I've never seen somebody who has such a fixation on promoting others' service, it seems, as a means of promoting how great he is. But that all falls away the moment that you see an opportunity to attack somebody who was a Trump supporter in Congress, right? That's what you have here. So it's gross, folks, but you're going to see a lot more of this. Remember, the left didn't have any principles before. They're not going to have any now. I have principles on, say, condemning political violence, and that's why I know that some people don't like hearing the truth about that, but it is true. Democrats don't have that problem. They're just hypocrites. What's going on within the Republican Party right now? We had a number of folks in the GOP in Congress who voted to impeach Trump. There's a lot of talk about the intramural fighting that's going on. Well, one group that has been trying to capitalize on that in a whole bunch of ways is the Lincoln Project. Our guest right now, Ryan Girdusky, joins us. He's got a piece in the American Conservative called The Lincoln Project's Predator. And Ryan, thanks for joining. First, just tell folks, in case anyone doesn't know who's listening to this, what is the Lincoln Project and what has it been doing?
The Lincoln Project is an organization of Never Trump Republicans led by George Conway, Steve Schmidt, Rick Wilson, more famously, they're the ones who go on television a lot. And they've raised well over $75 million from very gullible donors to attack Trump. They've paid their own firms millions upon millions of dollars. I believe it is Steve Schmidt was paid over was paid exactly $1.5 million for 1 month's work between November and December. So after the presidential election, he was already paid $1.5 million for 1 month of work. They raised millions upon millions of dollars to attack Trump and all Republicans. They spent millions against Susan Collins, millions against Tom Tillis. I mean, it's not just Trump, it's all Republicans.
Now, who are they raising, before we get to your article, which is, I think we could describe as salacious, in the content, what we're talking about here with this guy. Who are they raising? because people say that they're raising some of it from left-wing donors, so it's kind of a false flag style project where they're pretending to be one thing, but they're actually getting money from the left. But are there conservative donors who are giving the Lincoln Project money, or Republican?
I'm sure there are
donors who are giving the Lincoln
traditional
Project money?
Republicans who are like the Cindy McCain Republicans who are just repulsed by Trump's behavior, so they give him money. And who gives to campaigns? Who gives to PACs? I mean, most people who donate, a lot of people who donate are older people who maybe some were Republicans or former Republicans who were turned off by Trump's attitude or behavior. So they gave, their $100 or $1,000 and they are being swindled out of it. And they deserve as much as anybody does to know the truth of this organization.
Now, I mean, $75 million seems like a lot of money for something like this. A lot of money. And tell me, what do we need to know about John Weaver?
Right. So one of the organization's founders, his name is John Weaver. He was a former McCain consultant. He ran the John Huntsman campaign. He was on the John Kasich campaign. John Weaver followed me on Twitter over the summer, which I have a fairly large Twitter following, but I thought it odd since I'm openly supportive of the president. And he runs this anti-President Trump organization. Well, within a day of him following me, young men were messaging me saying, be on the lookout. He reaches out to younger guys to sit there and offer them career advice, and then changes to approaching them, to asking them for sex or questioning about sex, and wanting them to call him and approach him in some kind of sexual manner. This was the accusation lobbied. So I tried to I spent months trying to get a source on record, because I needed one. I'm not the Washington Post, so I need one on record source to come forward to admit that this happened to them, and to make this accusation public. I can't just use anonymous sources. Well, I couldn't get one. People were afraid. Yeah, these are young guys. These are guys in their early 20s. And John Weaver's a man who's 61 years old and has a lot of money and a lot of lawyers. And they were afraid of their careers being destroyed before they started. Finally, over the weekend, I was so frustrated with some of the tweets coming out of the Lincoln Project that they were going to start tracking every employee of the Trump White House. Some of these people are in their 20s and 30s and just starting their life, trying to make them unhireable. That I said maybe I should reveal the story of a Lincoln Project founder who was approaching young men for sex and promising them work that never materialized. Maybe his wife would like to know. And then I included the favorite euphemism that John Weaver uses in most of his messages, which he calls these young men "my boy," which is really gross and creepy, but he does it all the time. Anyway, I tweeted this out, and people started coming forward and saying this would happen to me, that John Weaver did. So I had on the record people, because people were posting on their own social media, and I was able to write the story of all these men. There's a writer by the name of Scott Stedman. He runs a website called Forensic News. Never heard of it. He's a left winger. He wrote a book about Trump and Russiagate and all the rest of it. But John Weaver wrote a blurb for his book. He has a professional relationship with John Weaver, and he admitted John Weaver did this to him. And he wrote an article, and between Stedman's article and how many sources he claims, the number of people who've come to me both privately and publicly, and people who've posted on their own social media John Weaver's messages, it's well over 60 young men have come forward and said John Weaver approached them in a sexual manner, offering career advice or career opportunities in exchange for sex, or just sending messages.
This would be under the general umbrella of gross and harassing behavior, but there's no allegation of actual illegality in any of this, right?
I can't comment
the
on
manner
that.
of age and everything else.
There's no manner of age that I know of, but I cannot comment on if there's nothing illegal, because I don't know everyone's story. I mean, this is a 4-day-old story that 60 people have come forward sharing messages. And it's always with the context of, I know there are worse. And I know this is much worse than what I experienced. And I do know cases that are much worse. But until any young man comes forward with anything and is willing to go on record, I can't say if anything is illegal. That being said, the promise of professional help in exchange for sexual favors, and then that's a form of grooming. I mean, he was approaching these men, and one of my sources
clearly highly unethical and disgusting. But just for all the listeners to make sure we're talking about
these are not children. These are men. These are adults. These are adults.
These are adults. Right.
These are not children. These are young men who are in range. The age range is usually from 19 to 24. That's most of the men. They range that, and they usually come.
Have you already gotten some backlash about this? I mean, I know you were on Laura Ingram's
show
talking about it.
Oh yeah. I mean, liberals are like, "How dare you? You didn't attack Trump." Well, I wasn't reporting on the Trump story. I couldn't make heads or tails of any of his allegations against him. And saying you can be mad at one, not the other, or because you didn't speak up against one, but you can't speak up against the other. That makes no sense whatsoever. I reached out to Lincoln Project. They have not made any single statement. They never responded to all my inquiries. John Weaver has not responded to any inquiries on the subject matter. He blocked me from Twitter right afterwards, as did a few other high-level Lincoln Project members. The Lincoln Project has not said anything, but they did take down their webpage that showed John Weaver as a founding member. They got rid of it completely. And then they posted a link of the accounts you can trust. And ironically, they posted every Lincoln member founder except for John Weaver.
We're speaking to Ryan Girdusky, author of They're Not Listening. He's also got a piece up on the American Conservative we're talking about now. Why should people in general now forget about the John Weaver story, which is a powerful DC insider abuse of power story, right? That's why you wrote that. Why should people know about the Lincoln Project? How much of a problem has it been, and will it be?
Well, they haven't been very successful on their campaigns. Most of it is a grift. Most of their money goes to themselves or their companies or their LLCs. They spent a lot of money against Susan Collins. They failed. Against Tom Tillis, they failed. They failed on many aspects of their campaigning. But nonetheless, this is not an unusual situation for people to grift. Grifting is very, very, very real. And I think there's a lot of people who give their hard-earned dollars to organizations thinking they're furthering what their beliefs are. And most of it's going to salaries and lawyers. And very little of it goes to actually making a difference. And Lincoln Project's not alone in that perspective. But we're at a point right now where I can't tell you how many journalists are working on stories about, the Turning Point USA and what goes on at their conferences, or Young Americans for Liberty, what goes on with their institution, looking into right-wing institutions for anything indiscreet when you have a major, major player. I mean, the Lincoln Project's founders were on television as of today, almost a dozen times since the story broke on Monday. And no one has asked them, hey, you have a co-founder who's been accused dozens of times of sexual harassment, of offering jobs for sex, of approaching young men in a creepy manner, dozens of times in just a few days. Do you have a comment on that? Nicole Wallace didn't ask it. Joe Scarborough didn't ask it. No one's asked it. And
I think this raises a bigger issue, Ryan, as well, of what we can expect in the Biden administration in general from the press, whether it's a story that would fall under Me Too or grifting or just general abuse of power. If it's not, I think the question goes to even bigger part of it. They're running on this whole Trump is an unethical man. This is an unethical administration. Okay, fine. You want to make that claim? Make that claim. Who else in the Lincoln Project knew about John Weaver and his actions? So I could tell you, I've had 4 people make accusations that at least 4 other Lincoln Project members knew about it openly and tried to suppress it. Not only did they try to, they didn't try to, tell John Weaver or oust John Weaver. They tried to kill the story because they didn't want it to come forward. So and they are complicit then in sexual harassment. Every single one of them that knew, and I guarantee you knew. And by the way, I will say this other thing about the John Weaver story. When I was getting close to publishing it the first time over the summer, John Weaver had a heart attack, quote unquote, where the Lincoln Project said he has a heart attack and whatever. I hired a private detective to reach out and to look at the nearby hospitals near his home in Texas and in Washington, D.C., and there was no record of a John Weaver ever going to the hospital. But they did know I was getting close to publishing the story. So
I think that this is a very nefarious organization that is doing things and suppressing stories. And if it's now 60 accusations of either creepy texting or strange behavior or open harassment, or, promising jobs for sex, and there's dozens and dozens in just a few days, what else is there? And unfortunately, journalists in America, they're looking for any other story that they could possibly do, rather than looking into an organization that raised over $75 million in a single solitary year to take on the president and the Republican Party.
Ryan Girdusky, he's digging in, he's getting answers. Go check out his piece on the American Conservative, the Lincoln Project's Predator. Ryan, good to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
We should be focused on bringing the nation together. Instead, Democrats are going to impeach the president for a second time 1 week before he leaves office. Why? Politics and the fact that they want to cancel the president. The president who cut taxes, the president who reduced regulations, the president prior to COVID had the greatest economy, lowest unemployment in 50 years, the president who got us out of the Iran deal, put the embassy in Jerusalem, brought hostages home from North Korea, put 3 great justices on the Supreme Court, gave us a new NAFTA agreement, the Abraham Accords, the COVID vaccine, and who built the wall. It's about politics. This is about getting the president of the United States. They spied on his campaign before he was elected. 19 minutes into his presidency, they started the impeachment push. 3-year Mueller investigation, 19 lawyers, 40 agents, 500 witnesses, 2,500 subpoenas, $40 million to find nothing. Impeachment round 1 based on an anonymous whistleblower with no firsthand knowledge who was biased against the president and who worked for Joe Biden. And now it's impeachment round 2.
It is indeed. It has always been about getting this president. It has always been about destroying Donald Trump, his presidency, his political movement, everything. And that's why it's so hard for many people now to see this as anything other than the last-ditch effort to. It wasn't enough to win the election. They have to get rid of Trumpism as an idea, as I've been saying to you. And that's why there's such a frenzy right now. On the one hand, they're telling us about unity. And on the other hand, they continue with this push to divide us and to say that Trump supporters are bad people, that Trump supporters are on the wrong side of history because they voted for Donald Trump. That's what they're telling us. And that what they really want to see is a big breakup within the Republican Party. They want a GOP, a GOP that's at war with itself. Tom Friedman of the New York Times, people still read this guy apparently. Play 18.
I believe that the most important thing that can happen right now for the health of the country is that this rotten Republican Party fracture, and that this is a party that is now marinated in and dominated by conspiracy theorists. It's been able to hold together, basically, under Trump because it had power. So because it had the control of the Senate and control of the White House, Republicans could tell themselves this lie. I wouldn't let Trump babysit my kids or coach my kids' little league team, but I love what he did on taxes or what he did for Israel or what he did for any number of issues. He doesn't have that power anymore. The Senate, Republicans don't have that power anymore. So I think this party is ripe for fracture. I can't think of anything more important right now, Brian, than that this party fracture between what I call principled Republicans, people like Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, and the unprincipled ones, because this is now Trump's party. And as long as it is Trump's party, it must be kept out of power.
They're telling you what they're hoping for here. And they view this as essential. They want a weakened and almost annihilated GOP right now. And they think they can get it. And a suppressed GOP that is just steamrolled by the Biden-Harris agenda. And they can get that too. This is not pie in the sky stuff. This is achievable for them. This is realistic for them. And That's why we have to take stock of what the political calculations are here in trying to pull Republicans apart, why they want to do that so very badly.